7-month, 6-day check-in talking about why nicotine is such a highly used and highly addictive substance. Starting out with mentally, and this starts out as nicotine users using their nicotine as a way to relieve mental stress. For example, I used to use it whenever I'd be doing tasks that were mentally strenuous, uh, highly mentally taxing activities. And I noticed that once I got to the point where I was stressed mentally, I would smoke my vape, I would hit my nicotine, I'd hit my nic, and then I'd immediately kind of have no more mental stress, and I'd kind of have a clear mind, and I'd be just ready enough and in the right mind space and state to go ahead and continue to work on that taxing activity. So yes, mentally, as well as the mental facet that nicotine being thought of as a nootropic, and if you don't know what that means, meaning a substance that has the possibility and potential to improve cognitive functions. This should be reminded, though, that there are other areas that are affected, and there are other areas that are afflicted by nicotine that go beyond the mental or its so-called benefits. For example, focus, cognitive function, the ability to help with cognitive function, it being used as a nootropic. It's not clear how long it even lasts, and it's not at lasting. It's not an extended lasting period of time where you receive the benefits of cognitive function from nicotine. It's however long it's in your system. It's not going to continuously help you down the road. So the fact that you have to keep on using the nicotine to continue to receive the nicotine as a nootropic to help you with your cognitive function is kind of a downside. But it's up to you to decide if that justifies it for you. Obviously, in moderation is the only reason you would ever go out of your way to use it in that way. In addition to the two prior ones, another mental facet to put into play is the conscious and the subconscious, and how they're involved with learned behavior and how they make up your mental state. And I also have that the way it affects is through group think, group conscious, universal conscious, also known as, I've heard, the universal mind, basically meaning by learned behavior that if you grew up around people that did it, say that you were at a younger age when you first were surrounded by it and you ended up getting into it, and then you matured and you grew and learned that behavior, and it became a cycle for you, aka addiction, and you haven't stopped, right? That's a learned behavior. Also, group think or group conscious, or the universal mind is telling that the more and more that nicotine is socially acceptable, or society, in the eyes of society, is more approved and more common in those terms, the more that non-smokers and non-nicotine users are looking from outside looking in, thinking that it's more normal, that it's more acceptable, and that if they were to do it, it would more lessen their burden, because they're like, oh, there's already this amount of people doing it, that's less pressure on me and more pressure on us as a group. And that's just lessening the burden. And not only is that, but mentally, the way that products are advertised, the way they design the products, the flavors, the colors, it's all aimed to kind of captivate you mentally and to get you to buy the products and to continue returning to buy the products. So that was mental. Now we're going to go to spiritually. And this can happen when people who are spiritually lost or trying to find a safe haven, a safe place, a home, comfort, then come across nicotine, and the effects the substance makes them feel a sense of comfort, and a false sense of comfort, that is, and a false sense of well-being. A delusional nicotine user may perhaps continue to confuse the good physical feeling they got with thinking that it is right for the spirit, or if it makes me feel this way, which is subjectively good, then I'm using my spiritual power to stay on the right path, regardless of my destructive behavior. And you cannot overlook your destructive behavior and say that it's justified. It's delusional because although you may feel fulfilled from your addiction and use, does not mean that you are doing what is right for your spirit. It doesn't mean that you are per se on the right path just because you feel fulfilled, or you've, for example, grown to add nicotine to your purpose or as part of your reason or part of your path. For example, this can happen if you start at a young age and you continue to grow. You've associated nicotine just because you've done it for so long as part of your reality, and so much so that you may even think that it was meant for you, or that and somehow confuse it with part of your purpose, when it is not so, right? That is a little bit of a delusional thought process when it comes to spiritually. But yes, you don't want to end up placing senses of spiritual feeling and spiritual power on an external thing, especially something so destructive and addictive as nicotine. And not only that, but if people are trying to spiritually detach from, religion or whatnot, they may cling on to things like physical things such as nicotine or devices that make them feel good in a physical way, and they're able to they're compensating that for any spiritual well-being or any sense of spiritual power or spirituality. Physically, nicotine users at a physical level are participating in an action that may make the body feel good, aka fulfill desire, but it is not to say that it is truly being a positive healing effect on the physical vessel. Obviously, based on what's been seen, which is quite the opposite from all ways of taking in nicotine, including vaping, including cigarettes, including chewing tobacco, and the effects that are seen from that use. When a nicotine addiction is formed, it can be hard for the user to want much more to please the physical body with a supply of nicotine, unless you provide moderation, unless you put into place moderation, because the more moderate you are with your use, the less that dependency has to build up. Nicotine users are in certain cycles, habits, and smoking behaviors, such as smoke the moment you wake up. And I personally would do this. The moment I'd wake up, I'd either have it next to me, or I'd reach into the table next to me, or the bedside table next to me, and reach in the drawer and grab it. But before I even got up out of bed, before I even had anything to eat, before I had anything to drink, I would hit it, right? I'd take a hit off my device, and immediately what that did for me, it was basically my morning coffee, if that makes sense. A really strong morning coffee, for that matter. The moment you hit it, it hit your lungs instantaneously. You'd get very lightheaded. You'd feel relaxed, and it might even end up putting you back to sleep. I remember that sometimes I would just ease back into where I was previously to when I woken up. And that can keep you docile right there, just in that, like not getting out right away, lingering around. And you don't want to be complacent there, for sure. So it becomes something that you start to do every day, and every morning you look forward to it. And the reason why, it's because you've had X amount of time, whether it be however long you were sleeping, you have that amount of time to not have nicotine in your system, and then when you wake up it gets in your system, the effects hit you. They have that much more of an effect on you because of how long it's been. And also, smoke at night before bed. Pardon me, I'll explain that. For sure, nicotine, when I was using it, I would do it all day, and it didn't stop when I got home and when I went to bed. I would hit the device almost, the most I ever hit it was when I was going to bed. That's the most I would hit my device, like 4, 5 really big hits. And it would just kind of, if you were tired and you were laying down already, you'd take these hits, and you kind of start to see what you see when you close your eyes, which is kind of like lines and lines and lines, a little bit of a fuzz, and then lines and lines. And it kind of has a black background, but there's gray in there. And, but yeah, it made your mind boggle almost. And when you laid down and you breathe, a lot of times I even hit it so much right before bed just to, send me off into my sleep, that I would gag, like, just because it's that much nicotine going into the system at once, constantly hitting it, putting it back in the drawer, laying down, no, that's not enough, let me grab some more, lay down, no, that's not enough. But yeah, it got to the point where it quite literally would make you gag. But I know some of those flavors, like the icy ones, they would literally like chill your lungs, I swear. You'd be like trying to catch up on breaths, and your throat would just be straight like ice, like a weird feeling, definitely a weird sensation. Like it felt like you were gonna stop breathing almost. It like felt like your lungs weren't working for like 2 breaths or a couple, just because of either how much smoke was passing through the airway, the icy feeling it has, and the foreign chemicals that are getting in the body. But that's use before bed. And I do remember when I look back to a time when I was abstaining from marijuana, I would buy these puff minis, and sometimes I'd buy like 2 of them, so I'd have 2 flavors, like a red one, a blue one, a cotton candy blue moon, I think it was called, cotton candy blue moon or whatever. But that's not the point. But I would have these, and I'd get off work, and I'd be like, I'm not going to be able to sleep because I had been abstaining from marijuana. I thought that I'd have a little bit of insomnia. So I actually doubled down on nicotine use when I quit marijuana. This was like maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago. I doubled down on the nicotine use, and I would have like a tea right before bed. I'd make tea, and it was a kava, which is what I'm drinking now, and it's stress release, and it would kind of get me like eased into relaxing and stuff like that, just because of the effect that the kava has as well. And then those puff minis, those nicotine devices that I would hit, I would just interchangeably hit them right before bed, and those are the times I was talking about where I would actually get to the point where I think I threw up maybe once, but other than that, it was a lot of nicotine going in the system, and it quite literally like was my means of melatonin. And per se, it literally put me to sleep. But yes, those are things to be aware of, and this creates a strong dependency of nicotine use, as you can tell, because your body starts to think it is a new behavior to expect every day and every night. It becomes a strict pattern. At the end of the day, people are going to be responsible for their own actions, and this is just to say to be aware of those actions. Be aware of how you treat your physical body, because your body is a facet and needed for you to continue experiencing the reality that you're in currently. So take that into consideration. Emotionally, I already talked about how all other areas such as mental, physical, and spiritual are persuaded into nicotine use. And that is through how the substance makes you feel. Personally, I feel that I depended on nicotine as sort of an emotional crutch. And it really was a way for me to feel good. Whether that was physically, whether it was mentally, spiritually, or emotionally, at first none of that was in my mind at all. It just was at the basis that it really just made me feel good. And you can't let that you can't turn that into an emotional crutch. You can't allow it to be an emotional crutch for you. You have to make sure that if you're ever going to continue to use nicotine or use nicotine, that you do it in such moderation that it's not as much affecting how you feel. You're just getting the physical and mental properties, spiritual and emotional properties and features out of it that you want or that are good for you, as long as you're doing it in a moderative action. You don't want to be numb emotionally either, which is kind of what nicotine addiction will do for you, because you're just deriving your emotions and the way that you feel out of this physical device, and you're not really able to feel your emotions to the maximum, to the highest of highs and to the lowest of lows, because you're so dependent on an artificial source of chemicals to enter your system and to make you feel a certain way. That's another big reason why I think it's big today, because I feel like people, at least those people that are using, and I know for my experience, it was a way of numbing emotionally, and it is a way of just wanting to feel good emotionally. And those are things to be aware of. Those are reasons to be aware of why nicotine is such a highly used substance and why it's such a highly addictive substance. That's going to be it for this 7-month and 6-day check-in.